Live from Dime Square, it's NFL Week 14, betting market outlook. Week 13 was lukewarm, I would say, from a live betting performance perspective. And one of the things that I kind of realized late in the game, middle of the week, I think I was just mentioning it to you yesterday, Judah, was favorites went 10-4-1 ATS, 13-1-1 straight up last week. And that's just not the type of volatility that's going to be conducive to really generating a nice, juicy, profitable P&L from live betting. And that's one of the reasons I think really the outcome was a lot of the teams that we bet on to come back or kind of betting on some volatility, just a lot of it just didn't materialize. We were very close in several, which made it very frustrating. And so it wasn't a bad weekend, but definitely wasn't a good weekend. Basically flattish for me.
Yeah, no, that's right. Thankfully, the live bets, I bet New Orleans plus 3.5 pretty early, which made up for what would have been among the most sour finishes of any game. I mean, the Saints have put me on a crazy tilt. I had a plus 450, one of these same game parlays that I've been leading into. Saints minus 2.5 and Andy Dalton 220 passing yards at plus 450. And the passing yards hit. And I just kind of wrote it off as like, okay, this is done. The Saints are going to win this. And then for Brady to come back, and I just couldn't get over Dennis Allen punting on 4th and 1 from the 43. The whole way it ended just had me on such tilt. I really needed a tilt, a Monday night tilt session.
Well, that's the worst one. That's the worst kind of tilt too, because that's one that holds with you all week.
Exactly. It holds. It's, thankfully we've moved on. But that was a tough way to finish what was, as you said, kind of a middling week. We've almost become so accustomed to live betting success. It's a good reminder that not every week, right? It's impossible to be winning each week. It's the NFL. There's a lot of as you said, volatility and variance, that it's a good reminder that you can't always win. And it's important to always be, looking for ways to get sharper and better.
Yeah, and in fact, I do take away the weekend as generally a W, given the fact that favorites performed so well, and there wasn't nearly the same kind of volatility that we typically experience on a week-to-week basis. The fact that we didn't get our faces ripped off is actually quite a W. Another thing I do want to give you a shout out for is, one of the things you post every Sunday morning is these moonshot bets, these like super juicy SGPs, and you don't brag about them nearly as much as you should. But get another, plus 1,500 SGP cashes. I mean, you only need like a handful of those to cash in a whole season to be profitable, assuming you're not like just a raging degenerate elsewhere.
Yeah.
And you've already cashed like 5-6 of these on the season. Yeah. So what was that plus 1,500 one?
I think it was plus 1,872. It was Hurts, 300 passing yards, Sanders under 58.5. I don't remember the third leg. I think it was like the Eagles money line. Something like that. I do want to take a point here, given the Twitter conversation from this week about same game parlays in general, which is like, use the market for what it's actually built for, right? Like, if you're just like messing around and putting together 9 uncorrelated legs, sure, maybe that's a sportsbook's best friend. But like, if you approach it as like a particular market where you can tell one story, and I outlined very clearly what that story was. The Eagles force teams to pass more than anyone else. The Eagles are very adaptable in their run-pass ratios. They're going to pass. Jalen Hurts' price is for his season-long average. What happens if they just pass the ball? And the Titans' pass defense isn't particularly good. I built that story. I said Miles Sanders is not going to run for as many yards as the season average. Jalen Hurts is going to go over his passing yards, and the Eagles are going to have success. And that was the story. And I got it at plus 18-1. And it's a particular market, and that's what same-game parlays are valuable for. Right? It's not just like this money-sucking, avoid at all costs. No, it has value if you use it for the right purposes.
Yeah. And that's why, I don't want to stir up a storm or anything, but it's like those BetStamp, the Hammer, this kind of incestual group out there is just adopts a lot of these. They're the old guard of sports betting. And they just continue to really hold on to these sports betting maxims of antiquity that are no longer necessarily relevant or maybe not relevant, but certainly don't hold the same sort of strength in its argument in today's betting environment.
Yeah,
Again, there's still so much just around the pre-game betting too,
Yeah.
and about CLV and betting early, like regardless of like you're making a bet on top of a bet. You're not even just betting on the team; you're betting on which direction the line's going to move. You're doing it with low conviction. You're doing it with low information. That is not a long-term positive EV bet unless you are a pro bettor and you are looking at all these lines and everything moving on a tick-by-tick basis, which most people don't. We don't.
Yeah, no, for sure not. And like, it's almost a good reminder that I just lost my train of thought for a second, but like, you don't have to be right. This is what I want to say. New information comes at us all the time, right? For a game that is constantly changing, you need to almost adapt and respond to new information. And like, what was true 10 years ago, what was true 5 years ago, what was true in week 3 might be different, right? Like, you always need to build in new information and look for new angles to attack, because the only thing that is certain is that what was true in the past won't be true in the future. And I think it's just almost a certain mindset. That's really what kind of I think the same game parlay represents, is like constantly be looking. If you want to be I don't even like the term like plus EV better. If you want to find terms like and ways to make money, just like look for new angles. You have to constantly be adapting. If you just get stuck in the same old like ways of thought, whether they're old, they're new, it's not going to work. You have to constantly be changing and constantly be evaluating your process. That's why I think we have such an insistence on process, because like that's really what kind of plays out over the long run and allows you to be profitable.
Exactly. And one of the older kind of legacy bettors out there, Bet Chris, who I'm a big fan of, he was actually posting something similar along these lines. Maybe not exactly kind of as this topic wasn't necessarily the catalyst for this commentary, but he was generally saying the same thing is, I mean, you have to adjust every single year. Process needs to change. In fact, again, betting maxims need to evolve, in fact, over time. And you can't just continue to hold on to those things. And there's a certain, again, group of influential bettors out there with platforms that continue to pound the table on this old school sports betting school of thought and basically denigrate anybody out there who disagrees with them, bullies them, humiliates them. You're a fucking idiot if you don't agree with them. And it's something I strongly disagree with. I think I've probably tweeted a few times and then get the kind of cathartic release of posting the tweet and then delete it and be like, that's too mean, or I'm being an asshole, or
no, I hear that. But look, I think it's important to always be kind of adapting to new information. Yeah, it's really what it comes down to.
All right. So, for those, watching the stream or watching on YouTube postmortem, we have our live bets kind of streaming down there in the bottom of the ticker. I do want to just go over a few of these before we move on to our drive quality scoreboard. Then we'll go into the market consensus rankings and then review week 14 or preview week 14. And, some of our mistakes and where we think we are on target. One of the things, obviously, Jaguars is one of our biggest losers. We took Jaguars plus 6.5, plus 8, minus 2.5, plus 250. Those obviously all blew up. We also took the Jags in circa, once again, getting buried by the Jags, probably easily. And again, they still continue to rank relatively high on drive quality and a bunch of other kind of like advanced metrics that say they're clearly a better team.
Well, trending in the wrong direction.
Suggests. But trending in the wrong direction. Yeah. And that's another thing is we do need to take a little bit more of a focus on too when we're kind of looking at
Yeah.
teams. And I know we do from time to time, but we haven't been like super consistent in doing
Right.
it. But yeah, looking at like the rolling last 5 weeks of performance, rolling last 3 weeks of performance. This is something we talked a lot about in the offseason, in fact, but we
Yeah.
just haven't put into practice as
Yeah.
consistent as we should. And so again, but just the net result is once again getting buried by the Jags. It's happened probably 10 weeks this season. And I really hope that, there's a way. I don't know how to prevent something like that happening in the future. Like where you just get tied so much to a particular team, you continue to think that there's value. I mean, who knows? Maybe there actually has been value on them, and literally we're just getting ridiculously unlucky. But there's some games that they're not even in.
Yeah, this was certainly one of them. They've been mostly playing close games throughout the year. This was just, I mean, the defense couldn't get a stop. And what's a little frustrating was, for me, I actually noticed when I was compiling, some graphs about how teams have performed the last 4 weeks. I was like, most teams look exactly the same, but there are a few exceptions, and the Jaguars defense was one of them. But I kind of just wrote it off, and I didn't actually do much careful analysis there. And then as it's happening, it's like, how did I not take this into consideration? How did I ignore this one piece, which was like obviously so important? And that was the story of the game. They didn't get a stop the entire game.
Yeah, and that's the story of the game and that's actually what actually prevented us from potentially leaning even further. And once it got out to the plus 1400s, plus 14 and a half, because I mean, if plus 14 and a half looks juicy, well, you would have lost even more money. But one of the things that was keeping us off that is, we were looking through the play-by-play, and it's like, they have not stopped the Lions once. And this was like 7 drives into the game. And it's like, we need to see at least one stop. We need to see at least something that suggests that they're going to provide at least some sort of resistance.
Yeah.
And it never materialized. So I think that was a good observation to at least prevent us from losing even more money on the Jags. Yeah. Another one was another huge, brutal loser that I do like. This one I like, and I'm totally fine with losing these. Jets minus 6.5, plus 320, plus 6.5, plus 14.5, plus 100, plus 440 on the money line. And I think a smattering of a few others, like very kind of like quarter unit bets and things like that, deep out of the money, that actually did end up cashing, in fact. So all these didn't even necessarily even lose. The 6.5 and the 14.5 all hit. But man, it just would have been a waterfall of profits if the Jets would have come back and win that game. And we're in position to multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, the just inability to score from within the red zone was detrimental and unbelievably frustrating. I also was a Garrett Wilson touchdown away from cashing another one of those same game parlays.
Yep. Same.
No, but I'm happy with that process, right? It's, again, we say this all the time, but the asymmetric risk involved, which is like we put ourselves in a position where we lost a little, but we would have won a lot more if only one small thing went right. Right? It's not as if it's like a matter of so many things needed to happen in order to make a lot of money. But it was the opposite, right? They needed to convert on one of those last two drives at the end. That's what it came down to. Whatever it is, and like regardless of whether that's justified or not, that's not really the point here. It's like they were clearly in a position to win, and like that's good value. And the asymmetric risk involved and the output, if they would have converted on those drives, would have been enormous. And that's exactly what you're looking for as a bettor.
Yeah, and that's exactly how you want to evaluate the efficacy of a bet, is not just on the outcome, the result of the match, but the process.
Yeah. And
were you in position?
Yeah, I will add, there was some pushback in the chat, which is good. This is exactly what I want, to encourage and force on, like, what do you see in the Jets?
Yeah.
Right. And you almost have to force and articulate exactly the case. And that's kind of what happened, which, as I said, like, I don't trust the Vikings offense to extend. And the Jets offense has been moving the ball fine. And like historically, the Vikings have been brutal with leads.
Yeah. In fact, actually, that's those three factors are actually the types of factors, even now that you articulate it, is the three factors that I feel like thematically we actually are always looking for when trying to really push into a live bet. There's one, the opponent is vulnerable. Two, the team that we're trying to bet on is moving the ball, but just not scoring points.
Yeah.
And the two has demonstrated an ability to do so in the past.
Right. So that's right. That's the key. It's like building in almost that prior based on a longer form data, and then like having your own eyes inform the experience of like what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like you almost have a better framework of evaluating a live bet based on what happens before the game, and you like see it happening in real time, and that's when you can almost have confidence triggering a bet like that.
Yeah. And that's another thing is, again, our game trade, live betting series every single Sunday. Definitely jump in and join. Like Judah mentioned, again, we had some pushback on some of the trades that we made, which again is great because it forces us to rethink why we're doing something and maybe back off or, maybe attack it in a different angle. And others, again, in there contributing other ideas. In fact, I wish we would have had, as I was mentioning to you earlier, I wish we would have had an even more successful live betting week, because this was in fact one of our biggest audience that we've had over the course of the season. We had over 100 unique people join. We had 20 plus people in there at a time. We had like 5, 6, 7, 8 active chatters in there. So this was one of the funnest ones, despite and
awesome.
super entertaining, super engaging, despite not again getting the best P&L.
That's right. But I will say, and this is a bit off topic, but there's a like distinct feeling, especially when I was like mostly playing daily fantasy, where it was like emotionally exhausting after a long Sunday of like ups and downs, and probably spending too much money at too young of an age. But aside from kind of coming to terms and learning with the proper emotional balance, it's just like you leave the stream every Sunday and you're like, man, that was such a fun time.
Yeah,
like I love that. It was awesome, and like the sweats are great, the tilts are great, and then like at the end of the day, exchanging ideas and like watching football together is the best part. And like I really encourage everyone to join us, to trade with us, to pitch ideas. It's so much fun.
Yes.
At the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Yeah, and we're always going to be looking for new ways to improve the experience, improve the stream. We're looking about moving potentially to a new platform that allows engagement to be easier, more fun. Run some polls, have some alerts, other badges. In fact, also what we did add as a new element this week was our live scoring bot that we had in the chat. That was super cool. And now, thinking about how can we get maybe injuries and turnovers in there. We got some of that feedback from some of our viewers around. And that's another thing is anyone who's joined, and even if you haven't joined, like any ideas or feedback that you have for us in ways that we could potentially improve the experience, improve the engagement, improve the overall product, and then hopefully also improve just the overall, again, betting P&L as well. Like we're open ears. And that's why we love people joining too. Again, we're a small platform. We're a small brand. We're at the very beginning stage of kind of our upwards ascent. And hey, I mean, you're kind of the OGs here. I know like we already have like Arjun, Dan, Darnell, like some of the faces that are jumping in like every single week. Like appreciate those guys like immensely.
That's right. You're 100% right.
Okay, so and then lastly on the live betting front, just from a recap of the bets that we made and whatnot, the Dolphins was another kind of big loser. Dolphins -2.5 plus 260. Dolphins -9.5 plus 440. So we were leaning into some like deep out of the money alts that were going to really be lottery ticket plays that if this game kind of basically reversed to of what it actually ended up kind of being.
That one fell flat on its face. I still love that play. Which is like given the situation, and like it didn't even turn out. The result wasn't great, and like Tua stunk. But like you didn't know that before it was actually happening. And I think given the context and like the market being slow to adjust to like Brock Purdy as the starter, I think it was worthwhile. And like a big conviction bet on my end before the game started, that the Dolphins would be fine with San Francisco. And like, look, it's football. Sometimes you're gonna have a bad game.
Yeah,
and that's kind of.
And again, even despite the bad game, I mean, they were in position to. Again, that's why we were kind of like on our heels the whole time because the Dolphins were never out of it until the very
end, and it like leaves a sour taste, which is why we have our, draft quality scoreboard and stuff like that to give us a better illustration. But it's true, and it was like, look, Tua kept on missing throws. Like Jeff Wilson was wide open for an 80-yard touchdown. Like. Looks very different. Brock Purdy made an unbelievable throw. On 3rd and 11, seeing the blitz. It was the third quickest pass. I saw this. It was the third quickest time to throw of any pass in the NFL season. He got rid of it in 1.6 seconds. It was a dime. Credit to him. Did I know that Brock Purdy was gonna come in? No, I'd rather bet you would assume that Mr. Irrelevant's not gonna be throwing dimes on 3rd and 12. But that's the life of a bettor. I think you stick to your guns. It's gonna happen, even if the results there don't show for it. And if you lean into bad process over and over again, this is looping in our earlier conversation, which I actually wanted to say, which is at the end of the day, the beauty of betting is that you put your money where your mouth is, and you'll be dead if you're wrong. You'll be out of money. No one will listen to you. It's you put your money where your mouth is, and if you're successful, that speaks for itself.
Yeah. And then I do want to close on, again, some actually probably the most successful bet that we had over the course of the day was the Chiefs-Bengals game. Took some Chiefs +3 that ended up pushing, but really leaned into the Chiefs +7. So we're a little bit early to the trade. Again, but no harm, no foul. Took a little bit of Chiefs money line as well that ended up losing.
I had Bengals money line also. Yeah.
Also came back on the other side and was able to hedge some of that. I got Bengals +3 +107 that we threw in there. So really kind of threaded the needle on that one. And I was even articulating this kind of live, which was betting the Chiefs money line. I felt a little bit uneasy on it. And I know because we were saying we could look back on this and say, oh, this was such a slam dunk. It was so easy. And in the moment, we're this does not feel easy. Even the Chiefs +3, didn't feel easy. But when the Chiefs 7 showed up, that was no,
boom.
Gotta hammer that. And in fact, that was the biggest single trade, net kind of dollar risk. That I know I had out there on any single position out there. So that was nice. And that was, one of the most successful trades and covered, again, a lot of those losses. And as we've talked about before, again, we didn't hit 50% this week, but we almost hit 50% never. In almost any week. And even the bets that I articulated, we lost a ton and we only lost a few and we only won a few, but those few make up for almost all of the rest.
That's
due to the plus money elements and other aspects of it. And we can skate by with 35%, 40%.
Yeah. I don't
Which again, doesn't feel good because you're still losing. And that's why even sometimes when we have really good weekends, it's at the end of it, I feel that probably wasn't that good. And then you kind of wait
do the accounting and you're oh my God, I'm up.
Yeah. It's wow, that was a +10 unit. God, I felt I lost every other bet, which usually I did, Okay, so let's move on to our week 13 drive quality. Anything kind of stick out here? I posted this a couple days ago. Some of the stuff that, stuck out to me was, some of the big rallies that we saw.
Yeah.
And, again, there was only a handful of them, as we talked about, because there really wasn't that much volatility this week. But one of them that there was, in fact, that we didn't make money on, we kind of missed, a little bit snoozed on it a bit, was Bears-Packers. So Packers time-weighted average margin, all right, was -5 points. Time-weighted average win probability was 33%. And yet, nonetheless, they came back, won the game in kind of really the fourth quarter, tail of the fourth quarter. Again, some Fields amazing plays, but also some turnovers and things that compromised the overall outcome of the game. But the Packers still end up coming back and winning it. And our drive quality scoreboard tells us that they did justifiably win that game. 28 earned points to Bears 24 earned points.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. A couple more that were really interesting. The Cowboys scored a bunch of defensive touchdowns, and they still had 48 earned points. That was very surprising to me. And also just, the Bengals winning by 7 against the Chiefs, they, had their way. And then the Raiders-Chargers game looks like a blowout, even though it almost came down to, and it was the Chargers were driving with, 3 minutes left in position to possibly tie or win that game. But the fundamentals certainly tell a different story.
Yeah. And in fact, this drive quality scoreboard from the Raiders Chargers, again, Raiders 30, Chargers 14, that actually does reflect kind of how I felt about that game.
Oh,
Like, we did lean into some Chargers, but it felt like, man, like they're constantly in 3rd and long. They're constantly like in bad positions. The Raiders is just like shredding them on the ground. And yeah, it
yeah,
ended up coming down to a 1-possession game somehow. But like that should not be your takeaway from the game. Like, the Chargers have some serious issues here.
yeah.
And so we look at the earned points over realized negative 5.6 points. So, they actually scored almost a full touchdown more than they actually earned in this game.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. The rest, I think, are relatively straightforward in how the game's played out.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, the only other one that I would call out is Browns Texans. Texans 17 earned points, the Browns 10. So the Browns scoring 17 full
Oh, yeah. It was defensive,
points over expectation.
Defensive touchdown party. Right, there was the kick return, the fumble return, the interception. Did they have? I don't think they had an offensive touchdown.
No,
in that game.
No.
Yeah.
And then again, just another further metric to really, again, flesh out how this game played out, which was, the final score says the Browns blew them out. The Browns covered the 7.5-point spread, but the time weighted average margin was still just 3 points. The time weighted average win probability was just 58% for the Browns.
Yeah.
Remember, the Browns were losing this game for a meaningful amount of the game, and we were hesitant to even try to get in and actually bet any Browns. In fact, I don't think we actually even did. I kind of felt bad about that because I felt like there was going to be a certain point in time, for one reason or another, that just due to the futility of the Texans, that the Browns, and we saw Watson make some bad mistakes, some bad throws, some hesitation, taking some bad sacks, just typical Watson, even probably compounded, but he did make some good plays. And I think that was enough to open the door to say, hey, we're getting the Browns went all the way down to essentially like -1.
Yeah.
At that risk profile, it was worth rolling the dice on some Browns. And so I think we left, some money on the table there.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, I think otherwise everything else in here kind of pretty much lines up. Washington and the Giants went to OT and tied. From our drive quality scoreboard perspective, would say that we give the dub to the Giants.
Barely.
Giants with, barely. 23 earned points to the Washington's 22. Also had a +1 time-weighted average margin as well, and time-weighted average win probability of 64%. So the Giants were in better position to really win that game. And so, probably a little bit more positives to take away for the Giants from that matchup.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into our Week 14 consensus market power rankings. Top 5, Bills, Cowboys up to number 2, up 1 spot. Chiefs down 1 spot, now to 3. Eagles 4, Bengals 5. And then to round out the top 10, we got Niners, Dolphins, Bucks, Vikings, Ravens, and then the Browns up 1 spot to number 11, just barely not sneaking in to the top 10. How are you thinking about this? Anything
the top
surprising?
10. Yeah, I mean, I disagree, I guess. So it's surprising in that sense. I'd still put the Chiefs at number 1. I am surprised a bit by the Dolphins not being downgraded. I assume the market would react to that, especially like losing to Brock Purdy. The offense didn't look particularly good. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of surprising because, again, when you look at the top 10 and then you look at the 11 through 15, it's like, well, yeah, who else is going to replace them? Like, there are just so few kind of good teams.
Yeah,
we have like that kind of elite tier or great tier, whatever you want to put it. But like the middle of the pack is really just so unbelievably weak this year that I guess it's not unsurprising.
Yeah. We look at the bottom, Titans or Texans, again, a consensus 32nd worst team, Bears 31st, Panthers 30th, Rams 29th, Colts 28th. From a drive quality perspective, we got the Bills, Eagles, Chiefs, Cowboys, Bengals, top 5. We've been super hot on the Bengals. Finally,
Season.
everyone's coming around to the Bengals. And now, again, this is one of those things where it's like, oh, now it seems so obvious. Joe Burrow's a top 5 quarterback. He got so much better this year, something that you were calling out, explicitly pounding the table
I
in
was.
our preseason previews around how Joe Burrow could take a massive leap from year 2 to year 3. Like, why can't we potentially expect that? And, the Bengals really probably bottomed, probably bottom, I would say, probably week 2, because that would seem like it was like absolute
lost to the Steelers, lost to the Cowboys, lost to the Cooper Rush Cowboys. It was like, oh, this is it. But again, it speaks to how short-term volatility exists in football.
Yeah, and also, again, keeping your outlook on the longer term.
Exactly.
Again, because we've actually made a lot of good money betting on the Bengals, betting on the Bengals coming down. In fact, I think, in the offseason, we kind of do some reverse engineering and look at attribution analysis around what drove a lot of our best live bets. I guarantee you it's probably Bengals.
Yeah.
Potentially Chiefs as well. But easily Bengals, because the market sells off on them even in game.
Yeah.
And you can get them at amazing prices.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that a lot this season.
But I think the Bengals also, it's important to recognize, right? You shouldn't just categorize all change and saying like, I'm going to like abandon my thesis here, or I won't abandon my thesis here. It's like a matter of like, you came in with a prior, right? That was like well developed in general. And like when the Bengals start 0-2, was it because the offensive line was really struggling and Joe Burrow was taking sacks, as if that wasn't already built in? Right? It's like you like have to do like a thorough analysis to kind of break down what went wrong and like, is that actually new information or not? And I think the Bengals are a great example, because like something we specifically highlighted was that the offensive line is going to take weeks because it's so new and they lack the continuity. It's going to take weeks if it's like going to come together, and it might come together later on in the season, right? And like Joe Burrow's going to take sacks. That's part of the picture. If Joe Burrow like regressed, that's a different story. If they weren't losing, I mean, he threw a bunch of picks in week 1, but like that's a lot of those were either terrific plays by the defenders, or like it wasn't that Joe Burrow was making terrible decisions. But like if Joe Burrow stopped completing passes or wasn't the same passer, that's a different story, right? But like if you pay attention to the long-term outlook and realize that like things can happen in the short term, like don't lose sight of that long-term vision. It's essential, and like it's been extremely profitable here, and in many cases, like the Bucs, teams like that.
Again, the Bengals have been dealing with a plethora of injuries as well.
Yeah.
And nonetheless overcome. And yeah, I think that's a huge, great call out around the efficacy of the offensive line this season. So coming into the season, all right, the ceiling scenario, the best case outcome is, wow, this offensive line comes in. It's a rejuvenated offensive line, much better players, much higher ceiling, and they perform awesome right off the bat.
Yeah.
That's the best case scenario. That's not the base case scenario.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was like a lot of the markets and a lot of handicappers and certainly a lot of fans base case scenario that didn't materialize. So it's like, whoa, something else is wrong here. Maybe it's Joe Burrow, or maybe the offensive line is just not ever going to come together. They're not going to have the right chemistry. Something that we talked about as well, like kind of doing like an off-season research project as well. It's like trying to evaluate chemistry amongst offensive lines and like kind of quantify how long does that potentially take to come together.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and we talked about like continuity, and there's been some cool research done about like the importance of continuity. But this is a great test example. And right, like players are not Madden grades where you sign a 92 and they all of a sudden start playing like a 92 in week 1. It's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah. And now also though, too, I'm getting a little bit cautious on Bengals now, because now they're red hot, sky high, and the market's fully appreciated it.
I wanna call out Zach Taylor's done a terrific job this year.
He's not done a bad job, I'll say that.
No, I think he's done a terrific job.
Okay.
And really what sold it for me is that 3rd and 11 was the final straw of just like aggressive play call.
Yeah, okay.
It's like this team is...
I don't know if I necessarily want to attribute to Zach Taylor, though.
They were, whatever, I don't care. I don't care if it's Zach Taylor, I don't care if it's the offensive coordinator. I care about like what's going to happen now. And whatever it is, I don't feel hampered by the coaching decisions of the Bengals like I would at any other team.
That's true. That's fair. Because regardless of what the source of that decision making was,
Yeah.
if this is going to be the outcomes, if this is how
Yeah.
decisions are going to be made within the organization, then that's a plus.
Exactly. I don't care who's actually the operative. I care about what's going to happen.
One of the things I did want to share, though, again, like trying to think about, is the market getting a little bit too hot on the Bengals now? Because basically everyone's riding them now. Is something that I saw Timo post was future strength of schedule for passing offenses over the final 5 weeks of the season. And we see Bengals, some of the more prolific offenses that we've seen: Dolphins, Bengals, Bills, Seahawks, Raiders, all having much more difficult strengths of schedule for the passing game over the next couple of weeks. So that could also be, a headwind at minimum, for the Bengals. And then on the reverse side, for those who can't see in those on the podcast, Vikings, Packers, Jets, Colts, Eagles, all at the top for easiest future passing defenses that they'll be playing against. So that potentially opens the door for something, again, like Mike White to potentially continue to play generally well. Again, He didn't play nearly as well last week as he did the prior week, but he seems like he has, he's competent enough, has the right kind of skill sets to continue to potentially get better on a week-by-week basis. And something that we've talked about a lot this season is the Jets have weapons.
Yep. They have good
and the Jets got a good play
weapons.
caller, so
I mean, couldn't get a creative play in the
I didn't say
in the red zone.
Red zone.
I'm sure they'll figure it out. That's probably a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So elsewhere, some of the biggest changes this week. Again, not a lot of changes, not a lot of movement.
It's week 14, right? Like that's the thing. It's like the football season, or the betting season, as I like to say, like works almost in 3 seasons, where it's like first 3 to 4 weeks are like a matter of like really testing your off-season priors. And like I can get really crazy next year in doing that. And then like the middle weeks of the season, like week 5 to week 12, it's like you kind of have a good sense of who the teams are, how good they are. But it's still like a push and pull where it's like, oh, was this because of matchup? Like there's a small sample size. We don't really know who's good. And like by week 13, week 14, like we know who's good. We know who's got the good, like also by unit. We know who the good pass defenses are. We know who the good run defenses are. We know who the good run games are. That's why you're not going to have as many changes. And we saw that last week also with fewer week-to-week changes. And now it's just kind of a matter of like executing. And like I think the focus should be less on fundamentals, almost because there's less edge, and more like, okay, what particular matchup, what particular angle within how these two teams play, and that's kind of the biggest source of value.
Yeah. And also, like we mentioned even earlier on this pod, was trying to look at, recent performance. So how these teams have evolved into who they're being, and not necessarily looking at, but again, you want to balance the two. And this is when you think about priors as well, like you have to also think about evaluating team. And we've kind of mentioned this in different ways, shapes, or form. But especially when I think about, in my day job, working in investments and how we structure our trades and the positionings that we have in our broader portfolio, all right, it's angled from strategic and tactical. All right, so you have your strategic views, all right, your longer term macro views that you think will play out over time. And there's going to be some noise here and there and in between, but you think there's one kind of general direction of a particular asset that you have a strong positive view or negative view on. And then there's tactical views. All right, so views that I think this is going to work for the next 2 weeks, for the next 2 days, maybe the next month. And then after that, like my visibility ends, and I just know I want to take advantage of it for this short period of time, relative to this longer term view that I have, and balancing those two things. And I think we do a pretty good job, of doing that. But I think that's something, it's a nuance that I feel like most handicappers out there, certainly most kind of sports betting commentators out there, kind of miss when they're talking about, betting priors and how that's playing into power rankings.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. It's actually something I'm going to focus in on the note that will come out tomorrow about balancing those two things. It's a good call out, and I think a helpful frame of mind to have for the next 4 or 5 weeks.
And as we get into the Week 14 games, a little bit of a preview here, something that I wanted to point out, which is so some of the biggest changers on the Week 14 basis. The Lions changed the most, upgraded 3 spots to a market rank of 21st. Look at drive quality.
Yeah, I keep on noticing this, by the way.
Yeah, and they've been moving up fast up the power rankings. And I've seen a lot of kind of tweets and whatnot. And I responded to some of them this week around how are the Lions favorites over the Vikings? Well, when we look at our drive quality power rankings, the Lions are 9th, the Vikings are 10th.
Yep.
And so this would say, well, and the Lions are at home. So, I mean, it's like, this seems like actually kind of, yeah, okay.
Exactly the price.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah. No, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me of what the delta between the 9 and 10 are, but I don't, right? Like, it's not going to be too crazy. I think it's almost exactly the price of what this game is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, this is such a huge off-market view as well, because drive quality 9th, again, broader market power rank for the Lions is 21st. And in fact, no one's really even close to us. Football Outsiders has the Lions ranked 13th. That's a market high outside, again, of
and I do,
quality.
Yeah. Another thing I want to test this offseason to see which model or brand most closely resembles drive quality. And I think based on just from what I've seen doing these kind of recaps as Football Outsiders.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to note that.
Yeah, that's been my anecdotal experience as well.
Although like they're clearly outliers, like the Vikings. Football Outsiders 20, drive quality 10.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, they were one of the things that I would give them the benefit of the doubt for as well is, I mean, they were very early to riding the Seahawks success, which, again, we have been resistant to riding early on at least. But again, that wasn't something that we held on to very long. We were very quick to adapt.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to use that as I thought I was going on for too long about the Bengals, but like, it's not just like, oh, you're saying that because you have the like benefit of the doubt and hindsight and like you just stick to your priors. Like, no, it changed really quickly on the Seahawks. And like, I went out and said my favorite bet of the season, and it's still my favorite bet of the season, was Seahawks Bucks. Yeah. Which is funny the way it turned out.
Yeah. Also, that's always like kind of like sometimes, and again, this is just anecdotal as well, but sometimes when I feel like just like crazy confidence on something, like anytime I would ever frame something as like, this is my favorite bet of the entire year, especially pregame, is I might be missing something because like usually I don't have that sort of conviction.
Yeah.
You know,
man, I've been fading the Bucks
successfully, yes,
at such success that I think the thesis just happened to not materialize that one week. But it's true, and like that's also a good reminder of like didn't break the bank. I didn't bet that much more than I usually do.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Bet sizing.
Anything also, like that's a situation where you have two options. You can either scale your bet. You can say I usually bet $100, but now I'm gonna bet $1,000, or you could like move the lines and get crazy on the alternate side. And so I'm still going to bet the same amount, but I'm confident this outcome will happen. So I'll move the price. Exactly. There's a word for that I'm not remembering. But either way, right? Like that's a totally different way of approaching it.
Yeah. No, again, well, all you're doing is like, and that's actually a good way to put it is if you actually have a lot of conviction, doesn't mean, you want to then increase your risk. All you likely do is you actually narrow the outcome of what you're looking for. So because you have such high conviction in a very particular outcome that in fact you'll scale most of your bets into that outcome specifically.
Exactly. And it's almost a great way. And this is the last thing I'll say on this. Like Jalen Hurts, perfect example, right? I had a lot of conviction he was going over his passing yard prop. I bet it live. I bet it before the game. And I had these like little same game parlays of like, I could have bet a ton on 220. I thought he was easily going to go over 220. But I like also wanted to sprinkle a bunch on him going to 300. And instead of, I basically eliminated all my downside risk because I'm not placing any, scaled unit. But like if I was right, the more right I was, the more money I make.
Yep. And that's how you should construct
You minimize
your bets.
risk.
Yeah.
You're minimizing risk. When you have high conviction, you want to maintain that same upside and minimize risk. It's like investing 101. I'm not even, what do I know about?
Yeah. No, and that's again, like that's why in order for you to capitalize on a view on a particular forecasted game script materializing, yeah, you could like bet the spread. And then you win a bet just like you win any other bet. But then you've left a ton of money on the table, especially if the game kind of materializes exactly as forecast. Well, it's like, dude, like that's only going to happen so many times in the season. And you need to make sure you squeeze as much juice
out of it as possible.
Out of that as possible. And you don't leave any money on the table. In fact, again, I was mad that I ended up taking Ravens live plus 5.5, which ended up doing nothing for me. Like in the last like drive or two, you could already see like the 5.5 wasn't going to do anything. I should have just taken the money line. It was like plus 140. I saw a little bit of safety in the plus 5.5, but again, it was a relatively low conviction. But that's the type of thing that you want to position yourself. Like if you're going to be right, make sure you're getting as much money out of it as possible. Because again, especially the bets that we take, again, the win percentage is low. And so you need to make sure that the return is high for the ones that you do win. Last thing on the market power rankings, biggest divers of the week. Titans downgraded 3 spots. Chargers downgraded 3 spots. Now to a market rank of 22nd, really in free fall. Jets down a little bit, down 2 spots to 17th. Jaguars also in free fall, down another 2 spots, now down to a market rank of 24th. Drive quality still hanging on, 13th. But ESPN still quite high, but we're still a market high on the Jags.
Right.
Even
but
after
lower, they were sitting at 7-8 for most of the season.
Yeah, this is one of the lowest that I've seen them. Kind of season to date.
I mean, they really got. And again, draft quality has been, carrying the warning signs of a collapsing defense.
Yeah. Last thing I would say on the market power rankings is, again, I saw a lot of tweets, especially live, kind of during that Saints-Bucks game, around kind of some realizations about. I don't know why it's taken this long, but I saw a lot of tweets coming out like, wow, the Bucks, like there's something wrong with the Bucks. And maybe it is Brady and like all those other types. And then of course they come back and win the game.
Yeah. But no one's talking about that now, by the way.
Now it's everyone's forgotten about it.
Materially changed. And it wasn't like a function of the fact that like the Saints went into prevent defense, stopped playing defense, and like the Bucks happened to win the game. And like if they don't win the game, the conversation is, oh, the Bucks have the same fundamental issues that we've been talking about since week 3.
Yeah. But one of the things I did want to call out was drive quality has been super sour on the Bucks all season and continue to be. So we got the Bucks ranked 18th, by far a market low. The next closest brand to us is PFF and Football Outsiders at 11th. So a material difference there. And this is one of the things that's that's kept us from not only not losing any money on the Bucks, but taking advantage and actually been fading the Bucks a lot this season. And even still, again, the Bucks came back and won, but Saints still covered that pregame number of that 3.5.
Yep. No, that's true. And that live 3.5 plus 140 that I got. Yep. I thought it was very poetic that we have the Bucks and Browns right next to each other, because no game I had a better sell than on the Bucks than that Browns game, where it was easily my most profitable week, betting the Browns. And again, that like definitely had some luck involved with the fact that they were in that situation in the first place. Yeah. And like they were being priced as big favorites in Cleveland. It's very poetic to see. If I lose all of my bets on the Bucks this year, it still will, or I should say the rest of the year, I still made enough money on that game to last me on that defense.
And hopefully not for the rest of the year, because I still would hope that we can cash our Bucks
under 10.5
under bets.
Yeah.
And also, again, fingers still crossed, my Panthers NFC South division ticket. It's not done, right? It's not done yet.
The line's moving in the Panthers' favor.
Yeah, I like it. Alrighty, so let's move on to NFL Week 14. Thursday night game, Raiders-Rams. Raiders minus 6.5 on the road, 43.5 the total. Again, I think it's still kind of unclear who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Rams. Right? I think I know Wofford is banged up. He's questionable. Obviously, they signed Baker Mayfield. Can imagine you'd see him.
He's not playing. He's not playing.
Yeah. And then Bryce Perkins. I think there's a big difference between Perkins and Wofford, especially, I mean, obviously their style of play. If it's Perkins, I'm just laying off. I have like no opinion. But if it is Wofford, I think there's some value on the Rams at 6.5.
No. Wofford's terrible.
You didn't like what you saw versus...
He was dreadful.
No, but I'm saying from the team in general versus the Seahawks on the road.
Plucky. Very, very plucky. I'll give him credit for that. I don't know. I had a feeling in my bad knee that they were going to show up for that game. I have no good reason why. Which is like why I didn't really lean into the Seahawks. They certainly looked plucky, but again, this is the team so devoid of talent. I can't bet on them. I just.
So, but it doesn't mean, I guess, that you're interested in the Raiders.
No, I think I'm going to play another one of these same game parlays only because the matchup against the Rams is really perfect. I think, considering that Josh Jacobs has had enormous run, he's hurt. It's a short week. The Rams have a really good run defense, not a particularly good pass defense. I'll take a little bit of like Derek Carr to hit his passing props and the Raiders to cover 2.5. I can probably get that like plus 130, 140, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I really like, just I want for the brand and for our viewers, trying to find for these standalone games, some like juicy bets to make the game fun, especially when it's not even really a good matchup. But we know, a lot of us just love football and we'll watch. If there's a game, we'll watch it.
They'll be I also like this bet.
So there will be bets.
Yeah.
And so we might as well try to help make at least, some fun ones and
I'll
hopefully some profitable ones.
Yeah, I'll be playing that. The Carr to hit his passing prop, Raiders to get most of the way to cover. Just because of the matchup. But it's betting on the Rams, not sexy right now.
Definitely not sexy. And no one else is doing it, in fact. So, I mean, according to, again, there's some questions around betting splits. I looked at betting splits across like various brands today. And it's just like a specific example. I looked at PFFs. I looked at pre-games. I looked at Action Networks. I looked at DraftKings. I looked at some kind of private, pick'em pools that I looked at to see how people were allocating their picks. And pretty much all the percentages are different. But the direction of them is typically the same. So that's why like the percentages aren't really that like important and don't necessarily give you a lot of insight there. But for those who like completely dismiss betting splits as if the direction of it is useless, I totally disagree with that. I find a lot of insight in it. And so basically what we can take from this is the broader kind of the people making bets on this game are pretty decisively on the Raiders side. 68% of bets, 79% of the handle on DraftKings on the Raiders side, and kind of looking at a host of others, again, the clearly leaning on the Raiders side as well for exactly some of the reasons that you probably talked about, which is the Rams are just so unpalatable. They're one of those teams that if you're going to bet the Rams, you really have to hold your nose on this.
Which
and
doesn't
it's not going to be fun.
Yeah. Doesn't necessarily make it a good reason to or not to bet. But I mean, I'm not betting the spread. I'm taking a totally different approach. So
makes sense. Jets at Buffalo. Jets minus 9.5. Total 44. It's supposed to be 35 degrees in Buffalo, so colder, but both
pretty good weather this
certainly.
Time of year.
Yeah. Actually, that's quite good. I mean, for me, I really like the Jets here. I mean,
Me
I don't
too.
know if I'm missing something. Like this is something I'll want to take like a closer dive into to really like understand. But on first blush, I mean, this seems 3 points too high.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, like especially right. I like to talk about points existing in two spheres. One as like a reflection of a fundamental value, and two as like points in an actual game. Like the Jets defense is still, they're good, they're healthy. And the Bills' offense has not been the same since Josh Allen's injury. It just hasn't, and they're still lacking in secondary weapons. The Jets are built to stop the Bills. They can get pressure and they can play good coverage. I think it's too high. Like Mike White's competent enough. The Bills defense, especially now with Von Miller after the season with the torn ACL, it's very beatable. We've seen that the past couple of weeks. I think the spread is way too high.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I think it's like decisively too high, but it doesn't seem like, in fact, that the broader kind of betting public is actually taking the bait.
Yeah, and again, I think even looking at PFF as a good illustration of this, which is like, if you look at the power rating, right, like how good the quarterback is, Mike White is a 1 right now, and I don't think he's playing to it, and I don't think this is a key point, which is like in a vacuum, maybe he's a 1, but given the way the Bills defense is playing right now, and especially with their inability to really generate pressure, I don't think the 1 part's going to come out. I think it's more like a 3. It's exactly the matchup where you can succeed. And like allow your weapons to get the ball in space.
Yep. According to PFF, again, 82% of the cash on the Bills, 61% of the tickets on the Jets. So I guess there is some, again, this would imply kind of like smaller ticketed bettors are leaning into the Jets. So I mean, there's some buying of the Jets there, but yeah, and the line's basically been flat. Looks like it did hit 10 for a little bit. Actually, then came back down to 9. No, actually, it doesn't look. No, it has not hit 10.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't expect it to hit 10. If it did hit 10, then I think the Jets are like a screaming buy. What are you looking at into this, like from a live perspective?
I mean, it's going to be Josh Allen. Right, it's got to be.
So that's the cue.
I think so. It's a matter of like, does the Bills offense have kind of the rhythm, the downfield passing game going? Like when Josh Allen threw deep against the Jets the first time, it was a disaster. And I mean, like the Jets have typically gotten off to slow starts, so I'd definitely be looking if the Bills score early to kind of hop on. That's when you can get to 10.5. Right, like lines for big favorites love to move in their direction early. This line can go to 13.5 if the Bills get the ball first and score a touchdown.
Yeah.
That's a buy.
If the Jets get the ball first and go not even just 3 and out, but just don't score, it's going to go to 10.5.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this is going to be critical. What I'm going to be looking for is, are the Jets playing competently? Because the types of mistakes, bonehead plays, bad play calling in the red zone that they did versus the Vikings, they can get away with it and still potentially be competitive. But I don't think it's on the road. This is a big game. It's a big division game. You're not going to be able to like dick around with the Bills in that way.
No. You'll get buried. But I also I have faith in the offensive staff. I don't think I don't know how good the play calls were. I'm not at that level. I have no idea. I think if they get into the red zone again, they're probably going to score. If they get a bunch of chances first and go with the 1 like they did last time. I'm willing to say that was an outlier week.
Okay, let's go on. Browns +6 on the road at the red hot Cincinnati Bengals, over under 47.5. Deshaun Watson looked really bad,
but that should be almost priced in. We knew he'd be rusty. That's another reason why I don't want to touch the game.
I think he's going to be rusty again, multiple games.
Yeah, so then you should probably be betting the Browns. The Bengals.
Right, I'm cautious on the Bengals as well, just because I know the market is sky high in them right now, and I know the last time the Bengals, and again, I don't want to tie too much into the last time they played and use that as kind of the lone signal, but the Bengals did not look good versus the Browns when they played earlier this season in Detroit. That was a terrible game. It was probably one of the worst games that they played all season.
Yeah, it was terrible. But I also Ja'Marr Chase is now playing, and I think it's a different team. But no, it's a fair point. I just I think Deshaun Watson's way too much of a question mark. it wouldn't be totally shocking to like see him play well. It also wouldn't be shocking to see like the disastrous performance that was last week. And again, if we see that like the same sort of lack of rhythm, lack of timing, which is what was plaguing him, and like holding the ball too long in the pocket, then I think I would definitely jump on the Bengals live. Again, Bengals are a team that starts slow.
Yeah. Yeah, and just looking at on the screen here, just how bad Watson played versus the Texans. -5 EPA, negative 0.2 basically EPA per play. Not as many plays, 27 passing plays, so not as many as you probably may have thought that they were. Again, easing them in, I guess, makes sense. But yeah, I think this is one that you definitely want to play live.
Yep.
Very hard to kind of forecast. Again, my forecast would be that Watson's going to stink again and be just good enough, again, to put a few together, like a good throw here or there to kind of keep the optimists' blood pumping. But beyond that, it's gonna be bad, I think.
Yep.
All right, next, what do we got? Texans 17 at Dallas. I've seen it kind of breach the 17 down to 16.5 on DraftKings right now, 45.5. Probably not too much to say about this game.
No, I have nothing to say. The only thing I'll add, just as contextual notes, is that, like, as we saw on Sunday Night Football, Dallas does, pour it on, or at least stays aggressive late in games. As I learned sweating out a bunch of these, Dak Prescott passing props. They pass.
Yeah.
So even though like they are a run first team at this point, they pass plenty late in games. They're aggressive, so I wouldn't be too worried off the 17. But like, I don't really want to be betting games with the 17-point spread.
No, I wouldn't be. If you want to bet the Cowboys, then you bet the Cowboys alt line minus 23.5.
Yeah. And like even still,
and get a nice like plus 250 or something. I think if the Cowboys are going to blow them out, they're going to blow them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's probably going to be a relatively like some some just like very sluggish game that you're not revealing a lot of plays versus a team like the Texans. The Texans play, again, like a little bit sneaky, and kind of win by 10, win by 7. Especially if they do play Davis Mills. I don't know if they're going back to him. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the Texans are doing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I prefer to build particular game stories here. This just seems like a good same game parlay type game.
Yeah.
Tony Pollard, breaks off a couple big runs, or they like ride Zeke in this spot. It's just like, I'd rather approach it that way than like a traditional kind of spread, even though I guess I always do that. But it's just like something about a 17 in for a team like the Texans is just not appealing.
Yeah. Minnesota plus 2.5 on the road versus Detroit. Again, this one of those games kind of generating some of the most buzz of any game this week. Everyone, again, scratching their heads. Why is Detroit minus 2.5? And we talked about this earlier. Again, drive quality has Detroit 9th, Minnesota 10th. Yeah. Makes perfect sense to us.
Yep.
I probably like the Lions here. I think it's, again, probably a game that you probably live bet and probably get the Lions at even a better price.
Oh, it's definitely a live bet game. Also, just like explosive offenses, bad defenses. The Lions are healthy now, which I think should be of note. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is just a machine, especially on late downs and in key spots. He's like every time on Sunday. And like I posted a chart about it on I think last week, just about like how his production on third downs. But it's like 3rd and 9, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 15 yards every time. But all right, and he was hurt, and that's really when their offense struggled. Jameson Williams is back. DJ Chark is back. Right, like I don't know how much Williams is going to play. I assume it's a little bit more. DJ Chark adds a vertical threat that they did not have earlier in the season. And DeAndre Swift has like some insane splits on versus off the injury report, and he was finally off the injury report last week. With that said, I think the Vikings have almost, from a market standpoint, have almost it's gotten out of control. But like, oh, they're 10-2, but they're frauds type thing.
Yeah,
like, the Vikings are exactly who we thought they were. And we've been
one of the most stable teams we've been talking about this like of the whole season.
I've been saying it for weeks, and like that's good enough in the in this NFC environment to like sneak out with a 10-2. But like they're still stable, they're still good. And like we know it's the same team that like in spots in the past 4 years, because it's the same Vikings team that will just blow out opponent of the same caliber or an inferior opponent. Like we've seen this script so many times. I think I have a pretty good sense of what the Vikings are. How that like manifests week to week is a totally different question. But like, it's not like it's almost like they're being punished for the fact that they're 10-2.
Yeah. Nonetheless, people are bidding on the Vikings despite the line moving in the opposite direction. 72% of the bets, 60% of the handle on the Vikings, according to DraftKings betting splits. But I looked at, again, the betting splits across various vendors and platforms all have most of the bets coming in on the Vikings. And nonetheless, we can see, obviously, factually seeing where and what direction the line is actually moving. And we see the line continues to inch more and more towards the Lions, which would suggest that, again, the common suggestion is that the sharper sports bettors are on a team like the Lions in this spot. Not necessarily at 2.5. Could be at 1. Could be at Pick'em, kind of where it opened. I think maybe +1 it opened. But again, though, from +1 to 2, that's not a huge, meaningful difference of a shift to begin with. So I think, when it comes to Circa, I think the Lions is a good pick.
Yeah.
Especially, again, if it's going to be a broader fade of what a lot of others out there are going to be doing.
I don't know. I think Circa will have the Lions. I think this game will be split. Like, I think someone's going to take a side on each of these games, on each of these teams.
Yeah, that could be right, actually. This could be like a very high volume game.
Yeah.
Because it has a lot of visibility. A lot of people are interested in it, generating a lot of buzz. Yeah.
Yeah. This seems like a live game to me and a close one. Again, I mean, the Vikings can blow them out. I think we might have some attractive, I think both passing games will have success. We might have some attractive, as I've been doing all season now, passing prop +7.5. Hope to, middle of that and have both cash.
Yeah. Dan also mentioning Swift banged up again as well. I mean, he's been a nice complimentary back, but he's certainly not been the featured back as well. And again, like the Lions are just bringing more and more weapons online. That's really moving the needle for the most part. And again, love the play calling. Ben Johnson's been awesome. Someone we talked about all season. Continuing to create opportunities for this offense. Next, Eagles -7 on the road versus the Giants, over under 44.5. We started the season's cool on the Eagles, but we've been tactical in betting the Eagles when we saw the time was right. Have you shifted any of your thematic views on the Eagles? Because I mean, on a relative basis, again, the NFC is so weak that it's not controversial to really admit that the Eagles are one of the better teams in the NFC, if not the best team in the NFC.
Well, I said this, I don't remember if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where I think the selling got a little too out of control, where it was we had for 6 weeks Eagles on top clearly, and then it was Cowboys and Niners are going to replace them, and no, I think they every bit belong in that discussion. And now again, after they dominated the team, and that's recent in everyone's memory, it's oh yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I think for the past 10 weeks they've been right up there as one of the best teams.
Yeah. And in fact, again, we leaned into the SGPs in the Eagles Titans, and we picked the Eagles in Circa, but this was a game we basically didn't touch live really at all. And I actually wish, kind of in hindsight, especially since we're so low on a team like the Titans, And drive quality's been hot on the Eagles all season, even if we, from a fundamental perspective, haven't necessarily agreed with it per se, at least to the same magnitude. I really wish we would have leaned harder into that Eagles game and played it actually a bunch of different ways, because that was like such a home run, so obvious, and kind of all of our kind of the way that we talk about these teams, it all lined up really perfectly. And again, the sell-off, that was a sell-off on the Eagles. 4.5 at home versus a team like the Titans. That's bonkers. Ravens plus 2.5 at Pittsburgh. 37 is the total. Very low. Obviously, no Lamar Jackson. We don't like Pittsburgh, but we've been warming up.
Yep.
I've been super cold on a team like the Ravens. Squeaked it out versus the Broncos on like one of the final plays of the game. Obviously, much tougher defense. I'm probably... This is going to be another good live bet game to really see how...
Yeah, I mean, it could be an
how the
all
game
under
scripts are
type
coming
game.
to play, and how,
I think, yeah, I mean, like, the Steelers' offense isn't great. Their defense is not as dreadful as they were without T.J. Watt. It's ugly. I just don't want it.
I mean, the Steelers play well. Like that's their forte, is to win these like ugly games, and especially at home.
Yeah. No, it's true. I have like a Bengals futures ticket that I placed on Sunday. That's almost enough exposure on the Steelers side for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the line's plummeted as it's become clear that, Lamar Jackson was definitely not going to play in this game. And they already had, a very hampered offense. And so as many kind of anti-superlatives that you want to kind of bring to the table on the Steelers offense, I mean, they've certainly been getting better, or at least not as bad. And kind of they do just enough. They keep doing just enough. And I think Kenny Pickett is going to continue to mature, just like you would expect from any rookie quarterback on a game-by-game basis. You can't have like a very static perspective of him, in this offense. I would potentially be looking into... This is probably not like a super sharp observation. It's probably pretty square. But, George Pickens shooting his mouth off this week. I was observing it and documenting it and talking about it pretty much all Sunday when we were kind of looking at props to take, and potentially that George Pickens, wasn't getting any targets and wasn't getting any catches even.
Yeah.
And he has been very vocal this week that happened, and he doesn't want that to happen anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So potentially look at, are they going to potentially try to force the ball to him in some way?
The squeaky wheel. Established the run.
Always a wide receiver too,
Always.
All right. Chiefs minus 8.5 at Denver. Always struggle versus Denver on a season-by-season basis. 44.5, the total, very high total for a Broncos game. Is this one, like, I wouldn't want to bet the Chiefs. I'm kind of waiting for the Broncos to kind of put together a sneaky, not good, but not miserably bad offensive performance.
Yeah. I just don't think it's going to come. And they're missing Courtland Sutton. They're so bad right now. I don't see. I think the Chiefs are going to get there, 27 points or whatever, and I don't see the Broncos keeping up with more than 14 or so. I like the Chiefs here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see what angle is there to buy the Broncos other to like throw your hands up and say they can't possibly be this bad. Like our draft quality has them as the worst offense in the league. I think that's probably rightfully the case.
Yeah. 82% of the bets, 79% of the handle, according to DraftKings, on the Chiefs. No one wants to touch the Broncos. I think this is one where, again, just lean into a potential alt. If the Broncos are really going to just be putrid, right, the offense is not going to do anything. And I think if there's going to be any team that breaks the back of the Broncos defense, in the sense of kind of like a true throw your hands up, like F this, it could be the Chiefs this week. And so leaning in to a Chiefs minus 16.5. Again, extending it out that
I mean,
if
I'll
you
also
think,
I know the Chiefs want to the Chiefs want to play bet the Mahomes passing props. I mean, they might be at such a premium, but I'm going to guess if it's 8.5, it's projecting a downgrade because of the Broncos defense. And I want to sell that angle.
Yeah. Although, again, I think the total at 44, again, especially for a Broncos game, that is pricing in a lot of a Chiefs offensive premium scoring there. But again, that's also pricing in then essentially what? That the Broncos are still going to put on the board 2 touchdowns plus.
Right.
Which that doesn't seem right either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think leaning into Chiefs alts, Chiefs, props is the way to play this one. My Panthers at Seattle minus 4.5. Seattle 44.5. Sam Darnold off the bye, rejuvenated, refreshed, healthy as ever. Versus a vulnerable offense, again, in a difficult environment. This is another one that I would probably like to lean in the alt. I'd rather take Panthers minus 2.5 or Seahawks minus 9.5.
Yeah. Well, I think this is also kind of a game where the wheels can come off for Darnold.
Think so?
Yeah, I mean, just in that environment.
It's a bad environment, but it's not necessarily an opportunistic.
So the Seahawks defense has kind of been like this the entire season, where at the peak, they were getting a ton of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's almost the live angle to look for, which the defense is going to be good if they can generate some pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, if they can't, they're very beatable. But Gino's also still playing that are pretty good. He slowed down a bit, but he's been terrific. He was awesome on Sunday. It's well documented at this point that it's relatively sustainable. His success.
Well, yeah, you can't still be arguing it against it here in week 14.
Exactly. But there's still this hesitancy to buy the Seahawks, and I think they clearly have the better offense.
Clearly have the better offense, sure. But
and I also wonder, if Kenneth Walker is not playing, how much that tilts them to the pass. This is an interesting conversation of how the run pass ratios look. There are a lot of question marks in this game, and I think fewer answers that pregame give me an angle to bet it one way or another.
Yeah. Pete Carroll surprised me this year. I know there's been a lot of positive things said about their OC this year as well, kind of being responsible for some of the rejuvenation in the offensive game and not necessarily being as stubborn about forcing the run game like a Pete Carroll offense typically has done. And in fact, even when the running backs are banged up, like Dan points out, that they would still force the issue and run the ball. So you're talking about the running backs are banged up, so that could maybe force them to potentially pass more. This year, I think, you probably could be right. And that was one of the reasons why I've been kind of off and wrong early on the Seahawks, was because, again, I thought that there was going to be more of that Carroll-led stubbornness and forcing the run no matter the situation, no matter the context.
Yeah.
But in any case, the Panthers defense is awesome. 81% of the bets on the Seahawks. Everyone loves the Seahawks. Super easy case to be made. And I think, at 44, this actually could be quite high. In fact,
Yeah.
especially if you think that Sam Darnold could potentially struggle even versus a bad defense. Again, unless he's giving up fumble sixes and pick sixes, under 44, potentially alt under playing this game is something I think could be potentially attractive.
No, I like that. I like that.
Bucks at San Francisco, -3.5 Niners, over under 37. Led by, again, Brock Purdy. Are we going to get, a similar performance, or is that kind of a one-off, kind of came in, Divas couldn't adjust, kind of comes in? We've seen that numerous times. Quarterback comes in and plays great, and then performance is not followed up.
As much as I hate the Bucks, I don't think the Niners are a buy here. And also, there's almost like this assumption that the Niners are going to slow down the Bucks, but because of how bad the Bucks, they can't get much worse on offense. I don't think the matchup's actually so much of a downgrade relative to like what their offense has been performing like, and the market's almost pricing that. And like I'm just not sure about, as you said, like Brock Purdy introduces a lot of question marks. We've seen a rookie come in one spot where the defense didn't prepare for him. I'm not sure he'll be able to have the same success. And like it's 3.5. It's not a pick 'em line here. The Niners are clearly the better team, I think. But it's not enough to trigger a bet here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, if anything, I would lean on the Bucs side in this one, especially over the field goal. I think Purdy coming in versus a vulnerable defense like the Dolphins, unprepared for him, have no real meaningful tape on him, and now the Bucs have a full game, essentially, tape on him, and it's a much better defense that I think can create some, because that's basically that whole game. We were waiting for Purdy to make like a game-changing mistake, which he didn't do. So props to him. In fact, again, he made some like the opposite kind of game-changing plays that ended up breaking the back of the Dolphins, and had some really clutch throws. But that could be a lot of adrenaline. He obviously has skill, but I think he's going to look a lot different versus a team like the Bucs, especially the Bucs defense.
Right, which is fine. I don't think it's great. And like Dalton was having their way when they actually decided to throw the ball. But
our drive quality is very high on the Saints, in the Saints offense, in fact. So that's not actually that surprising.
Cooled down a bit.
It's cooled down because we were like red hot on them, like way too hot on the Saints.
Yeah.
I think another way to attack this game, especially too, would be looking at, again, my all unders. I love all unders. I understand it's already rock bottom, 37.
Yeah. Those have been the spots to capture the 26s. You've been doing that all year.
Yeah. And again, you discount 10 points off that total. I mean, you're out to like plus 400.
Yeah.
And in a season where there's low scoring, I mean, again, that's basically saying you got to win at least one of these bets every 4 times to break even.
Yeah.
And it's winning, and as long as you're tactical and strategic and you're doing it live, especially, you've already seen some of this game script start to materialize. That gives you a lot of edge to really be able to take advantage of some of those. And so that's something I would definitely be looking at this, especially if you get a very generous early score that kind of pushes this up above some of those kind of traditional key numbers, 40, 41, 42. That would be a chef's kiss, slam dunk, all unders, like 35.5.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's it. You're right. It's a good angle.
Dolphins -3 at Chargers, at Arjun's Chargers. Arjun been dragging the Chargers through the mud this week. Rightfully so.
Yep.
Is this like buy the bounce back from the Dolphins here and continue to sell spiraling Chargers?
I think so.
Is this a game where now, again, but again, even when the Chargers play a bad defense, they can't even necessarily exploit it to the extent that you'd think that they would.
Yeah. I mean, it's like not the same offense. I think that's to what they were last season. Again, I'd like to think that the Tua game was an aberration, and I recognize my language there is very revealing. I'd like to think, which says like, okay, it's an angle I'll have to bet live, but I can't really pull the trigger beforehand because I don't have any conviction one way or another.
Again, this is also, remember, I mean, Tua was arguably playing the best defense in the NFL, or maybe the top 3 defense for sure. And the NFL on the road. And yes, and he missed players, but those players were open.
Yeah.
They were still competitive.
Yeah. I mean, like he was straight up just missing throws, and that was a game like I was actually able to focus on. I don't know. I also like the Chargers are weird in these spots. It's like they show up on Sunday Night Football and like play a great game against the Chiefs. I don't know if the good Chargers or bad Chargers are going to show up. I do know their defense is dreadful. Passing, running, they can't get a pass rush. Like I think the Dolphins will be able to score, but like, do we have the Tua from the first? It's just like, again, I'd like to think it's an aberration, but the fact that I'd like to think it is not enough for to trigger a bet.
Yeah, and remember, we looked at our market consensus power rankings. In fact, we were surprised that the Dolphins weren't downgraded at all, and that does make a lot of sense why the Dolphins would be -3 on the road versus a Justin Herbert led.
Yeah.
And cross country on the other side. So this is the Sunday night game too, so does mitigate some of that element as well. Lastly, Monday Night Football, Patriots essentially pick them at the Cardinals. Drive Quality hates the Cardinals, has hated them all season. Again, even with some of the players coming back.
Well, now they finally have the full roster back. Right, they've got Hollywood back. They've got DeAndre Hopkins back. I mean, Dan can check me here if they have Rondale Moore back too. And what's been the kryptonite of the Patriots defense? Scrambling quarterbacks. If Kyler's running,
good point.
I was bullish on the Cardinals long term, and this is exactly the spot I was bullish on them. Which is like, I was waiting for it to happen. I think this is kind of the spot where it might come to fruition. And just like Mac Jones is not. It leaves room for error because I don't think the Patriots can be able to move the ball so easily.
I like it. Huge coaching mismatch. But the market definitely leaning into the Patriots, according to PFF, 75% of the tickets, 70% of the cash, leaning in to the Patriots. And the Patriots, have been kind of wishy-washy. Sometimes they look good. Sometimes they look great. Sometimes they look terrible. And as you pointed out, specifically against quarterbacks that are inclined to run, and especially if they're good at running. Yeah, I definitely like that angle. Again, I think the coaching mismatch still makes me a little bit hesitant.
Yeah, although I think that's schematic more so than decision-making, which is like perfectly covered plays against. This is the classic stat. Like the Cardinals for 2019, 2020, and 2021, all worse than the league. Kyler Murray is constantly coming for coverage. I think that's a symptom of what people point out as Cliff Kingsbury being a poor coordinator. I don't think he's been so terrible in the decision-making. And Bill Belichick actually hasn't been particularly good. How that, how the game plans work, obviously, is up for question, and that's where I think the coaching difference would mostly manifest. But that's why we bet live.
Yep. And this is going to be a difficult week picking from a circuit perspective, and also from a live betting perspective. This is going to be, a shorter slate than typical, with 6 teams on bye: Falcons, Bears, Packers, Colts, Saints, and Washington, all on bye. So definitely this is one of those weeks that we've talked about, like a compressed schedule, as we get some of these final teams lingering with some of their byes.
Yeah. But have some time.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone for joining. Again, please come join us on our live betting
That's right.
game trade stream on Sunday. Come with ideas. And we are trying, it's mostly due to my fault, trying to get on earlier so we can prep, stir up some discussion. So we're not kind of like jumping in as soon as the games are starting. You're trying to like figure things out as it's all kind of materializing.
That's right.
And actually start to construct some, kind of game plans, take into consideration whatever's kind of happening, early on that Sunday.
Build some juicy same game parlays.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the plan. We're going to plan to do that, try to jump on at noon. And if we don't, noon Eastern, and if we don't, it's my fault since Judah wakes up at like 7 a.m.
Right. That's right. The adrenaline of a fall Sunday morning. There's nothing like it.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everyone. And that wraps it up. That's closing bell.